I was born and raised in the southern United States. As a result, I had never once experienced snow. Sure, we have had frigid temperatures occasionally throughout the winter months, but none that persisted long enough to warrant any fallen ice. Whenever I would hear my friends online complain about the cold weather and driving in snow, I would always half-heartedly agree that their situation sucked, though I never really understood what they meant, as I hadn't experienced it for myself. When I had finished college, I had received a very promising position at a new company. The details of the job were very lucrative, but there was somewhat of a catch to the position. They wanted someone with my education to be part of their new branch office that they were opening. The new office was located in a small town in northern Wisconsin, practically the other side of the world for me. After some discussing with my parents on this course of action, they told me that if I liked the job I should do it, but if I didn't, that I could always come back. I thanked them for the support, and after locating some suitable apartments in the area, I packed up a truck and drove up there. That was about 3.5 years ago. I remember my very first winter there. The temperature had been steadily dropping as the summer months waned. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, I had awoken to a pure white landscape as far as the eye could see. As I stepped out from my apartment looking on in wonder, I felt my foot slide out from under me as I crashed down the stairs. The utter shock and embarrassment I felt was otherworldly as I shakily pulled myself to my feet. Driving to work was even more challenging, but with the advice of my friends and coworkers, I managed to make it to work without killing myself. Despite the distaste my friends all had for the cold weather, I was actually quite fond of it, especially during the evenings, when the city goes to sleep and the whole world comes to a standstill, save for the quiet flakes of snow that drift to the ground. Those moments, for some reason, felt special to me. After 2 years of living and working up north, I had acquired a rather nice savings account. I had started to grow tired of living in an apartment and having to deal with the headache of neighbors. While it was a good place to live, I wanted something with a bit more privacy. I had shopped around for a few months before locating a house on the western side of the city. The house sat near the edge of a dead-end street. The other houses nearby were quite spaced out, which was a big plus for me. The house itself was somewhat plain, a brick exterior with an assortment of windows dotting the outside. A few precariously placed shrubs and bushes gave the yard a modicum of character. The front yard was quite expansive as well, but that just seemed to detract from the backyard, which was nearly non-existent. Inside, I was impressed by how large each room was. While the living room and kitchen were both large in their own right, just like the backyard, it took away from the other areas of the house. There were only 2 bedrooms towards the back, and 2 bathrooms in between. Upon haggling the price a bit with the sellers, I was happy to accept this as my first official home. After the paperwork had been settled, I began moving in right away. The months passed by and I had fallen into a sense of normalcy. I had acquired a bit of a routine and the weeks seemed to blur together as time passed by. My first winter in my house was a giant wake-up call. While some of you who live in the north or in colder locations would know, there's a lot to deal with in the winter. Shoveling the sidewalks and driveway for one. I remember waking up one morning, getting ready for work, stepping outside into the frigid air only to realize a mountain of snow had blocked in my car. I just barely made it to work on time after digging it out. Over these years, I haven't had a single issue living in this state or area. That was until a couple months ago. I had woken up on one of my days off from work and decided to get some chores done. I picked up the house a bit and decided to clear the driveway as snow had freshly fallen the night before. I donned my heavy winter coat, retrieved my shovel, and stepped out into the cold. As I journeyed down my driveway to where it meets the street, I glanced over and saw something peculiar. There were 2 perfectly placed footprints on the sidewalk. facing my house. I trudged over to them to get a better look, and sure enough, there they were, as if someone had been recently standing there. What struck me as odd was that there were no other tracks leading to or from these footprints. I stared at them a moment longer before disregarding them and continuing my chores. When I was finished, I went back inside and lounged around, playing some video games to pass the time. Before I knew it, the sun had long since set and it was already nearing midnight. I rubbed my eyes, which had been strained from staring at my TV for so long. I decided it was time for bed. The next morning, as I was leaving for work, I had noticed some light snow had fallen once again. Thankfully, it wasn't enough to block in my vehicle. As I stepped from my porch towards my car, my eyes drifted over to where I had previously seen the footprints. There was a set of new ones in the snow. I walked over and noted that they seemed to be a bit closer to my house. The location where they had been previously had been covered by the light snow from the night before. I glanced down both ends of my street before kicking some of the snow to cover the footprints. I made my way to work, and when I got there, I asked a buddy of mine if he had seen strange footprints outside of his house before. He just gave me a puzzled look before playfully asking if I had just gotten out of a bad relationship or something. I shook my head and he told me that he hadn't. Throughout the day, I couldn't seem to get the thought out of my head that somebody was making these footprints in the snow outside my house. After work, I carefully drove home as the snowfall was getting heavier and heavier. Upon pulling into my driveway and getting out, I looked over expecting to see those footprints again, but thankfully they weren't there. Every morning since then, however, I would walk outside to find fresh footprints in the snow. Every time they would be in a slightly different position in my yard, and each time they would be slightly closer to my house. 2 weeks ago, I decided that since I had the following day off that I was going to stay awake all night and catch whoever it was in the act. I sat in my living room watching TV all night with my back to the large window. Every 20 minutes or so, I'd occasionally peek outside to make sure everything was normal. At around 4 a.m., I heard the billowing wind outside and that drew my attention. I peeled back the curtain slightly and looked out into the swirling darkness. Through the flurry of snow, I thought I had spotted someone briefly. Despite the low visibility, it looked like there was in fact a person standing outside in my yard. I quickly got up from my seat, grabbing my coat in the process. I threw open my front door and stepped out onto my porch. I squinted my eyes as flakes of snow peppered my face. There was nobody there. I was beginning to think that this whole situation was just getting to me, that my fatigue was causing me to hallucinate. Though there was no denying the freshly placed footprints I saw the next morning, in the same exact spot I thought I had saw the person from the night before. Then, 2 days ago, I made a very startling realization. Something that has caused me to lose sleep over the last 2 nights. I had awoken and glanced outside my window in the morning. The untouched blanket of snow laid peacefully across my front yard. I thought that whatever it was had finally stopped, and that things could finally go back to normal. As I opened my front door to go to work, however, I froze. They were there, directly on the other side of my front door. I'm not entirely sure why, but my mood shifted from annoyance to a growing sense of dread. Just the thought of someone standing on my front porch long enough to make these marks in the snow, and leaving without a trace, was enough to send chills throughout my entire body. While that was unnerving in its own right, that wasn't what caused me to lose sleep over the last 2 nights, though. After I worked up the courage to step outside and past the 2 footprints in the snow, I walked over to my car. As I drew closer, I glanced back to my front door, and in doing so, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. I looked over towards the back of my house. I carefully walked around behind my house, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There were at least 30 separate footprints spread throughout my small backyard. All of them facing my house. All of them not leaving any tracks whatsoever. I'm not sure what to do at this point. Have any of you ever seen strange footprints appear in the snow around your house before? I've considered calling the police, but they probably would tell me there wasn't anything they could do, at least without catching someone in the act. But by this point, I don't think I want to catch the people responsible for this. I've decided that I'm just going to cash in all my saved vacation days and visit my parents. It's not much, but hopefully when I get back, some of the snow will have started to melt.